Terry Linhart is professor of Christian ministries at Bethel College, and for over 25 years, Terry's speaking, teaching, research, and writing have allowed him to become a global voice on the topic of Christian ministry, leadership, and education. He's been recognized as one of the top 50 professors in the United States on leadership strategy and innovation as well. Good to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yes, yes. So we're talking about teaching the next generation, and you're on a quest to bring teaching back into the forefront of the Christian church.
Yeah, I think there's enough concern about teens leaving the church after they're done in a youth group or a setting and what they know. And it seems like we've forgotten to talk about teaching. I remember years ago that people used to have teaching training seminars in churches, and it's faded recently. We haven't talked about it. We kind of traded it out for experiential moments. And I think it's to our detriment.
Okay, so you think that that emphasis on education, on the Sunday school, not just for kids, but for the whole family, for every age group, that's kind of morphed or migrated over to making the services themselves more experiential.
Yeah, it's a shared concern, I think, in our busy age. And to be fair, we can learn and get information now 24/7. I mean, so there is learning taking place all week long. And but you know this, that a lot of churches have changed out Sunday school for small groups, and it's become a connecting point. And I think now that we're starting to see, okay, what is it that people know? What do like young people, what do they know when they leave the church? Is that really do they know much in theology? Can they articulate some of this, the basics of the Christian faith? And when is it that we learned that? And I think that is a concern. And so the book that I edited is a collective of many people who shared that concern. And we put this together so that we can, again, champion teaching.
I'd imagine, though, without that teaching, that fundamental teaching, the foundational teaching, that we pay a high price in discipleship. I mean, it has a trickle-down effect. When someone asks you, name Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, a lot of Christians can't even tell you what that is. I mean, talk about the impact of that, and I'd imagine that's why it's so important to get back to it.
It is concerning how people can't do it, just a general timeline of some of the major characters in the Bible. But I think if we look at our own growth in our life, who had an impact on our life, likely there's a teacher. I mean, even walking in here today, there's the legacy of teaching here at LeSEA that we champion around. You look at churches who are growing. You were talking about Christian or Christmas and New Year's services. Churches that are growing generally have someone who is known as a good teacher at the forefront. Teaching really does matter. We as parents think about what is it we want to teach our own kids in the home. And so I think it's okay to talk about it. One of the problems is that when we think of teaching, we see it as not very exciting or kind of inert. There's some moments where teaching can be kind of boring. And I think we can be creative again as we talk about helping the next generation.
Well, what are some of those ways that, pastors who are watching today, I've kind of left teaching, left it to someone else. How can we be creative?
I think that vary our methods for one. So for instance, if we just traveled around and said, what's the default teaching we would see in a local church adult Sunday school class? Generally, it's someone up front who all week studied something, struggled, read a book they liked, the latest book on something, and they're then presenting, here's what I learned, and they're just talking the whole time. And they're giving information out. And so the learners, we sit there, we may scribble a few notes, we may say, oh, that's really good, but there's not this struggle that we have as a learner too. So varying the methods, I think, is the most creative way. Learning how to tell a story well, to invite small group participation, to create questions rather than just provide answers.
That kind of reminds me of what someone did 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I was just even working through part of the book this week of Jesus with the rich young ruler, just a holistic understanding of learning. In fact, the invitation to discipleship was, hey, just come, follow, hang out with me, and you'll get it. We'll do it together. Yeah.
Now, is that enough? I mean, does that supplant or replace or do away with the need for a systematic theology or a systematic educational discipleship program? I know it's more about transformation than it is about transmission of information. Yeah. But is the relational connection enough to get to get the job done?
You know, it's interesting. The book, the Teaching the Next Generations, is a group of leaders. It was like a who's who list that I asked, and all of them said yes. So I'm really excited. And we needed a book in college to help us with that. But the shared concern was exactly that. That first is the character of the teacher and his or her proximity to the students. And a lot of times in churches where, especially larger ones, that like the one I'm in, we've distanced ourselves, and we need to again get closer to and embody and live out what it is that we're teaching, so that there's a moment where people can say, "Oh, I see what you mean," or "Oh, I see what you're teaching in your life. I get it." Because not all of us can hear information. We learn differently.
Different ways, yeah. Right.
And so by watching, often that's how a lot of people learn.
And you really go back to the basics. You say to be a person of prayer,
Yeah.
so you can, have that transformation take place.
Sure. I mean, it's a transformation that Christ authors in our life through the power of the Holy Spirit, and it's definitely a spiritual dynamic. We have to be on our game, right? We have to think through, how is it I want to teach, and what do I want to do? But God gives the victory.
Now, Terry, it's teaching the next generations. So when you just touch on the topic of, the statistics and the trending of young people leaving the church, getting to the college age, up to upper high school, and just going a different path, a different way. What are some of the fundamental reasons for that? What is it that's missing?
So I think that one of them is this idea of helping young people wrestle with some of the harder questions. We tend to just want to protect, and I think that's to our own detriment. I was with a church leader just recently, and she was sharing that in her youth group that she leads, one of her main things is to raise the questions and to have the discussion and the struggle there. And I think secondly, when we talk about, you talked about theology, when we talk about Christian theology, we tend to dumb it down, to not have them think about, we don't want to go over their heads. And Louis Giglio recently said on a podcast I heard, he said, he's a well-known speaker with the Passion Conferences, he says that you want to, maybe if you do go over the heads, that's a good thing, because then people reach up for something more. And it's this idea that we want to take people somewhere instead of just give them just a little bit to get through. And so I think that is one of the loudest things that David Kinnaman from Barna Group and the Sticky Faith from Fuller Youth Institute have identified, is we want to help people to not be afraid of the questions, because there is an answer to them.
So how do your students respond? You're a college professor. When it's done right, what can we expect from, the next generations when we get up and teach correctly?
Well, I think there's two things. One is there's a lot of excitement. There's an energy. There's a joy. Sometimes in some circles we're afraid to be joyful in our teaching, but I think if we're excited, passionate about this gospel, this message, then there can be an energy behind the teaching. Then I think we were joking just 2 weeks ago when I finished classes that when you are teaching well, there is a moment where students wrestle, and it can look like frustration and a sense of, and they have to work at it. That's okay.
So you're making progress when you see that, right?
Sometimes, yeah. Hopefully, most of the time. We want it to be the case. It's you want to be careful of that you don't frustrate to the point where they just give up. But I really help people work through a process where they themselves were creating a system for teaching, and it's hard work. But when they're done, they're really proud of it, and there's a smile on their face, and they walk out with something they can use.
Now, you work in the arena of academics, high-level stuff. For mom and dad, that want to ground their kids, grind through it and ground their kids in a real faith that's going to be able to stand and withstand the forces of culture. What are some simple things or key things that as moms and dads we can do to help convey the truths of the gospel?
I have found parenting to be a really strong place to apply good teaching principles. In fact, on the way over here, I was thinking of, okay, I need to sit down with one of my sons and work through something. Okay, what's my goal? What's a teaching goal for that? How do I develop them? How do I help him take his next best step in whatever we're working through? And then how is it that I want to present it, and then draw back and let him wrestle with that? And I think that's one of the things is we start to say, okay, where is it that I can help my student, my child, teenager, grow spiritually, and then how can I help them do that? And I also think as a parent, we monitor their world, this social world they're in, to pay attention to who their friends are, what is the input, where you can't unplug, they can't unplug from this social media world, but what is it they're plugging into, and then how can I inform that without being out of touch? So there are a lot of resources online through apps that we can put in touch with our students that actually connect with their world in a way that they enjoy.
They enjoy. Wonderful. Well, it's good having you with us today, Terry. Thanks for stopping by before Christmas. Terry Linhart, our guest, and he's editor of Teaching the Next Generations, top minds in Christian teaching right here. And to connect with Terry, you can go to terrylinhart.com or go to our website, harvest-tv.com. You'll find an easy way to link back. Coming up later, Pastor Mark Lance with today's Connections, but up next, we're going to hear from Brian Bush as he joins us from Bethlehem with a special Holy Land moment.